you're such a good boy. Let's carry on with our .NET MAUI Maps app for tracking Poo Bin locations. Today it's time to put some meat onto the bones. Not literally, Captain Scrunch. Coming up, we do some refactoring with the help of a poor programmer. We get some bin locations showing on the map. And Captain Scrunch shares some important thoughts with us.
I'm hungry.
Welcome back to Coding with My Dogs.
Last time on Coding with My Dogs. Now I'm carrying this bag for who knows how long, and as always, no bin in sight. I'm building an app to find the nearest poo bin. Now I know where I am, but I've still got no idea where the bins are. The dogs are getting annoyed, so we better make some good progress today. The intention for this week's video is that we start off with... Oh, bugger! I forgot to take my coat off. Hold on, I can do that YouTube thing. How does it go now? Something like... Oh, wow! That makes things much easier. Okay. The intention for this week's video is that we start off with a little bit of refactoring, because at the end of the last session, it was in a bit of a mess. I didn't like the fact that a lot of the code ended up in the code behind, for dealing with the map control. I would like to see as much as possible done within the XAML. I kind of let Copilot do that stuff for me. And it's, it's certainly possible to define a certain amount of stuff in the XAML for the map's UE control, but there's going to be some things that we end up having to put in the code behind because it's just the way it is. But I want to try and keep it as lean as possible and do as much as we can within the view model itself. Let's start with that. If we open up the application, let me just share the screen. Let's see if we can build that. Now, we're pretty much back where we were at the end of the last session. If we have a look at things like the main page.xaml, you can see what we had. We had the content view where we'll drop the maps control into. And then obviously, as I said, there's a lot of stuff happening here in the code behind. Initialization of the map control itself, and then dealing with what happens in terms of getting the location from location services, and then centering on that location. MAUI program.cs, we're just setting up our location service, counter model in the view model. And then the main page view model itself. Not doing too much for us at the moment, other than just wiring in the location service and some of the demo stuff that we had from the start. What's the matter, hey? Good boy. Captain Scrunch, what you up to? What are you doing in your bed, huh? And then the location service. It had what we needed for making sure that we've got permissions, and then for getting the location and returning that back to the view model. We need to start off with some refactoring to shift some of this code behind into the XAML page itself. And what I did was go and do a little bit of research using ChatGPT, and it's got this deep research functionality where you can suggest certain things that you want it to read into, So I went and did some research on some of the aspects of the maps control that we are going to need to make use of. One of those things was to ask, what can we do in terms of hosting it in XAML? And, to be honest, it's no different to any normal control. It's just a matter of bringing in the namespace, and then we can set up the control itself in the XAML. And later on, we can sort of wire the map into it that way as well. First, let's take a look at that page. So it basically gave me a fair detail of research to do with how to handle clicks and how to put the markers in place, etc., etc., etc. And then in terms of how to host the control in the XAML, we've got a few options here in terms of setting up the map control and then binding a model for the map. But first of all, let's just copy this. Let's take the namespace that we need to put in place. Go back to Visual Studio. And here we can go into the main page.xaml itself. There we go. That's fine. And then we can just get rid of this content view. In fact, we can probably just rename that to the MAPSUI : app control. Let's change the name to map control. Everything else we can probably leave as is. That looks fine to me. Now, we need to make sure that our code behind still works with this. So let's take a look at that. So we're no longer bringing in what am I saying? Yes, we're no longer dealing with this map container. So we don't need to do that. We don't need to do the build map control. That's done for us. Although I wonder if we get a default tile layout. We'll leave this code here because we may need to copy and paste that in somewhere else a little bit later. And then, yeah, we don't need to bring in the map control here either. And then when we get to this, we can say map control. That over towards the right where I prefer it to be. Right, so we can see we have a blank screen, but we can see that the control is actually there, but it's just not displaying anything. So it's what I suspected before. We basically haven't defined the OpenStreetView initialization stuff that we were, OpenStreetMap, I should say, initialization stuff that we were doing before. So let's move that into the on appearing so that we've got an ability to plug that into the map control, and hopefully that will sort the problem out. So let's just copy and paste this. I knew there was a reason that I left it in place. And we need to go to capital M map control to get the one that we're getting from the XAML itself. We can delete this. Save that up and restart. That's great. So the map's there. We're back to where we were before. Again, as I said in the research, we can bind to a map model here and have that within the view model. So I think that means that the initialization of the map itself and then adding things to the map we can do potentially in our view model and then defer out to that using a binding. So let's have a crack with that. So let's see what we can do. Stop that from running for a minute. Okay, then, where are we? We need to go into the XAML and we can say we want a map binding to map model. Sort out the tabs. Great, that gives us that within the XAML itself. And then if we go into the main page view model, we can expose this map model property, which will then give us the ability to set up the map and do some stuff with it from directly within the view model. So let's add it here above the counter text. Public. What's it going to be? Map MAUI dot map model, maybe model, something like that. Make that init only. So that should hopefully still work. So this is creating a map which will get used by the control. Do we build? We do build. There's no real way to see that this actually does anything yet. So why don't we move that initialization code from the code behind on appearing and put that into the constructor for the view model. We are going to set this map model .layers.add tile layer. Ooh, should we give that a try? Lovely. So that works fine. We've done a bit of refactoring already. So, let's have a look and see where we are. So in the XAML, we've got rid of that content view and we now just have the map control hosted directly. In the code behind, we've got rid of all of the initialization stuff and some stuff from the constructor there. And then on appearing is just dealing with getting the location and plotting the location, which we'll leave as is for now. And in the view model itself, we've added this new property to expose the model, and we've done some initialization within the view model for that, which is great. I think what we should eventually do here is to have updates of our location flowing in from the navigation service. So the navigation service should expose an observable based on some sort of interval timer, maybe once every 5 seconds or so. And every time that fires, it gets the location and pumps that through the observable. Now, the view model can then subscribe to that observable and have its own property that it can raise and notify property changed off the back of every time we get a distinct update from that observable pipe. I think the view itself should be responsible for obviously everything that's view related. In other words, it should understand the map control and perform all the actions that, initialize and update the map display. And saying that, I think, we need to probably refactor what I've just done. But let's kick that can down the road. We'll draw a line under the refactoring here and move on initially to bringing in a set of predefined bin locations into memory from a resource file. I think that's important because as we're debugging this application, we don't want to have to be sort of manually entering bin locations each time we start it. So this gives us a base to work from as we move in later in this session to actually plotting the bin locations on the map. First, should we take a look at the whiteboard again? Follow me. Okay, Mr. T, we're back at the whiteboard again. For this session, I need you to concentrate a little bit harder than you did the other time. Can you do that for me? I'm not confident we can. Anyway, let's get on. So we've already done some refactoring today. And as we mentioned, next we want to go and add some new bin locations that we can use for testing out the application. Add the Poo Bin locations. In a resource file. The final step for this week's session is that we want to show the locations of those new bins on the map. What do you think, Mr. T? So basically, when we're done today, we have each location shown on the map like that. Do you agree? You're fast asleep again, aren't you? Oh well, better just get on with it.
We've completed the refactoring for our MAUI application. And now, as I mentioned in the previous session, we're ready to introduce a new feature. What we want to do is to have the ability to retain a set of Poo Bin locations in memory, and we want to load those initially from a JSON file. So we're going to define a data model for the bin locations, which is each bin location is going to be very simple. It's going to be a GUID. It's going to have the latitude and longitude. It doesn't need to have a name. That's all we'll do for the moment. We will create a file populated with sample data, which will enable us to do our testing later on much more easily. As soon as we start the app, there's already a number of locations populated, and we can use that for testing, showing where the bin locations are when we come to that stage, and then showing the navigation to those bin locations from a starting point. And what I'm going to do is go into Copilot now and ask it to define our data model. So let me share the screen so that you can see that. Here we are back in our solution. What we're going to need initially is the pure data model for the location and for the collection of locations. So let's see if we can go into Copilot. Please define a data model class named bin location, which maintains the location of a single bin by latitude and longitude. It has a GUID identifier, but doesn't need anything further. So there's its plan. Create a models folder, create a new class bin location, and then populate that. So let's see what it's done. There's a class, bin location, and it's got GUID ID, latitude, longitude. That's fine. Only thing is, for something this simple, it's not going to have any logic in it. It's not going to have any methods or anything like that. So I reckon this should be a record. Please convert this into a record. And there we are, super simple. The ID, latitude, longitude created as a record, so we'll accept that. Perfect. So that's fine. We've got our bin location for a single bin. What I think we need now is we want to put in a service that will manage this list of bin locations in memory for us and give us the ability to do things like adding a new bin, adding a set of bins, or querying the bins that are already defined in that service. And then of course, we can do stuff like having that available via dependency injection. So we can have that singleton class sitting there in memory, maintaining the list of bin locations, and it can be used later on when we want to actually show the map locations. So let's get ahead and do that. Back here in Copilot, we're going to say, please create a bin location service. This service maintains a list of bin locations in memory and provides methods to add a single bin, a set of bins, and to return that list of bins. Give this service an interface type as well, and register it as a singleton for dependency injection. This is where something like Copilot really comes into its own, because this is really boilerplate code. I could go and type all of this in myself. It's not hard, it's fairly straightforward, but it's laborious. And I can easily check what Copilot creates for me. All I need to do is to review this set of files that it creates and the set of changes that it makes, and that's perfect. So I can see here that it's created the iBin location service. I expect to see 3 methods there. We do add bin, add bins, and read only list to get all bins. That's fine. If we look in Maui program.cs, I expect to see it doing the dependency injection to add a singleton accessed via that interface that resolves to that concrete type. And if we look at the type itself, we've got list of bin locations, and we've got the methods to add range, and then return the set of bins as a read-only list. Perfect, that does what we need. So let's accept all on that. Nothing's working yet, but let's just give this a build. Whilst we're building, we may as well check the dog cam. Okay, Daddy's doing a lot of coding. I know, I'm doing a session for everybody. They want to learn how to put Poo Bin locations into their application. Okay, so it builds correctly. That's good. Mr. T has just come for a bit of pair programming, but not necessarily too helpful as things go. Come on. Big guy, come on. Off you go. Back in your bed. Back in your bed. Come on. So that's brilliant. We've got our bins in place. This service is available, so anything further down the line that needs to get that list of bin locations, very trivial to do. We just need to bring in this iBin location service interface. It's all done for us. So the next step is we want to be able to create our sample file as a resource that can be read in. And then during the program initialization, we want to do that. We want to read in that file and then push the locations that we find into this bin location service. So let's just do that as well. Please create a poo bin locations.json file as a resource and create startup code, which will run once the application has loaded completely. And that will load and pass this JSON file and add the set of locations from that file into our bin location service. What's the matter, Mr. T? It's getting exciting, isn't it? I know. I can understand your sense of excitement because this is brilliant. We're about to have our set of Poo Bin locations loading from a file. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? Okay. Come on, let's see. Do you want to check the changes with me? So it's created a Poo Bin locations.json file. And it's put in some sample GUIDs and some sample latitude and longitudes there for us. We're creating a data initialization service. Okay. And that will take in the bin location service, and then during its initialization, it's going to open this app package file from resources raw, Poo Bin locations.json, stream reader, load it in as JSON, deserialized to bin location data. Okay, that's defined there. Bin location data is just a set of bin locations, and then it's adding it to our JSON service. So that's fine. Let's double check that the naming of these things is fine. So we've got ID, latitude, and longitude, which should work fine against our record class that we're using. And in Maui program.cs, we would expect to see some way of kicking off that program initialization eventually. Sorry, right. I missed one off the bottom. So in app.xaml.cs, it will be presumably overriding. Come on, Mr. T. Overriding the onStart there, and then calling the base, and then calling this data initialization service to do that initialization. That looks good to me. I think that's going to do what we expected. So let me click on accept all there. And what we can do now, we'll check that it builds, which it doesn't because it's missing that somewhere. It's not good at remembering to put in using statements, I've noticed. Probably less good than even I am. Okay, cool. So it builds. What we can do then is, I tell you what we'll do. If we go and have a look at our Solution Explorer, if we have a look in our, let's have a look in our on appearing. So let's plumb in our bin location service. So let's create a field off the back of that. And then here, let's just good, it knows what I want. So let's save that down there. So what we should basically see is that when we load this application, as soon as it hits this breakpoint, we should be able to see those two bins that were defined in that sample file appearing here. So let's run this up and see what happens. Okay. Both main page was set and create window was overridden to provide a page. Let's take a look at that. Main page that says obsolete. That is new, isn't it? It's been introduced as part of that change. Can I? Yeah, it's introduced. It's snuck that in. We don't need that, and that's broken the application. So if I delete that, oh dear, thank you, Copilot. And let's run that again. Hopefully that'll do the trick. It's always doing its own funny little bit that we didn't quite ask for and didn't quite help us in any sensible way. We hit our breakpoint. And if we have a look at bins, it is empty. Okay. Time for a little bit more in-depth debugging. Let's have a look at our bin location service. Now let's have a look at our data initialization service to start off with. Make sure we get our file and make sure we deserialize it correctly. So let's just restart the application and see where it goes. File not found. Resources raw. Poo Bin locations.json. Can't find that. Anyway, let's look at our Solution Explorer. Resources raw. Poo Bin locations.json. It's there. It's set as Maui asset. That should be fine. It should work. Open app package file async. File not found. So I'm asking, is there anything wrong with the path at line 17 of data initialization service? Because I get a file not found exception here. Yeah, check it's there. Check it's MAUI asset. We've already checked that. Okay, so it's saying we don't need the full file path. We just need the name of the file itself. Shame other GitHub Copilot didn't know that, but they obviously don't talk to each other. Let's try that. Bin location data. Bin location count is still 0. Okie dokie. JSON content. There's bin locations with ID, latitude, longitude. I don't know if it's a capitalization issue. Maybe we need to specifically set that. Can't remember offhand how we do that with JSON serializer. There's serializer options that allow us to do that. So let's have a quick look, and otherwise we'll ask Copilot. Oh, I think we can pass serializer options here, can't we? Yep. Options equals new JSON serializer options, property name case insensitive. Do you know what? I'm going to stick with that. We don't have comments in there, but that should do. And then we can do comma options there. And let's kick that off again. Data count equals 2 bin locations. And we've got latitudes and longitudes there. Clear that breakpoint, let it carry on to our next one, which I must have unset. Did I? I did. That's disappointing. Let's just restart that. We just want to confirm here that it goes all the way around and comes back from our bin location service. And bins. Yeah, count is 0. So good job we checked that. That didn't work either. This is getting called before the onStart gets called. Well, that's very disappointing. I will go to the big guns now. I'm going to go to ChatGPT and ask it what I should be calling to make sure that I have an application startup override that gets called before anything happens within the application shells or the pages that get loaded within the shells. So let's go and ask that. So my question is, in .NET MAUI, I want to initialize some data during application startup by calling an async method. And I want this to happen before the on-appearing override in my main page.xaml.cs gets called. Is there a suitable hook for this? I tried onStart on the app itself, but that didn't get called until after on-appearing. Okay, so it's going back to this concept of setting up the main page first, but I don't like doing task.wait, but it probably doesn't matter in app initialization because you've only got one thread running. But, can I maybe I can fit it in here with the create window. So let's just tell ChatGPT that we do that. Oh, I don't particularly like that, but let's just do it. So put that there, and we are calling our data initialization service from this task.run and then just blocking until we get a result from that. That's fine. That's fine. And then the app shell gets created off the back of that. And there we go. Perfect. Our bins are created there. So that's where we wanted to get to with this first step. So we've done the refactoring to our application. We've now got the ability to load this set of sample bin locations on startup. That seems to be working finally. And in the final session, what we're going to do is basically use that set of bins that get loaded and plot the locations of those bins on the map. So we'll get onto that bit next, but now I think it's time to pause for coffee. There's something powerful about rebuilding what you already know, but in a new language or framework. It's not just about repetition, it's about layering understanding, adding a bit at a time, standing on the shoulders of giants maybe. I'm kicking things off in familiar territory, still within .NET, but blending my past lives in WPF and even Silverlight. Yes, really, I went there. With more recent web UI work in React and Angular. It gives me just enough footing as I step sideways into a new space and into this scary new world of video production. This first project is kind of a bridge, part software, part storytelling. Later on, I'll be wading into much deeper waters, but always try and anchor at least one part of the journey in something I know. Hopefully that makes it easier for you to follow along, maybe even try something new yourself. This whole channel is about learning new stuff together, and with dogs. As always, please like, comment, or subscribe. It's very early days for me, and I appreciate any feedback. In the last session, we put some plumbing in to allow us to have a resource file with a number of sampled map locations within it. Since that session, I've populated the sample file with some completely made up bin locations from Hyde Park in London. I think we've got about 6 locations there. So for this last session today, what we want to do is to take that sample data and basically plot those various locations onto the map. And we'll do that using just like a red circle, something like that. So let me share the screen. So as I said, the bin locations JSON now has a number of example locations which are within Hyde Park in London. And what I've done is that I spoke to our friend and asked what we need to do to implement the layers that show the bin locations. So it's basically saying that if we have latitude and longitude, we use the Mercator projection to get ourselves a point. We create a point feature from that. And then we can give that feature the styles of ellipse, and red color, and a particular scale. It creates this memory layer for the markers, and then we just add that to the map layers. Let us copy that. Now, what we had, I believe, at the end of the last session, is that we had the view model itself doing some sort of view specific stuff here, creating this tile layer. And we decided we don't really want that. We want to kick that stuff into the view itself, or the view code behind, because that's where it's going to have to be done. So we'll refactor that and bring in the change that we've just grabbed from ChatGPT. Okay, so I've been flip-flopping a little bit about how we're going to organize this. What should be in the view model, what should be in the view. So I've asked my friend ChatGPT about the responsibilities, and it kind of lines up with what I was saying, in that it's saying, the view model is responsible for the data. The view obviously is responsible for the presentation part of it. But I think it's come up with a relatively pragmatic solution here, in saying that, ideally that state and presentation is very nicely separated. But with something like this, it's kind of difficult it's suggesting this view model first map approach, where it's sort of doing what we had started doing at the end of the last session, where we have this map model that's done within our view model, and that's responsible for doing things like adding layers to the map model, and then that gets bound to the map control for the presentation layer. So we're doing kind of a little bit of user interface control type stuff within the view model, but we can probably get away with it. So I think for the sake of simplicity and not sort of going backwards and forwards on this too much, let's try and go ahead with that concept. So if I switch back to our Visual Studio, I'll cut this stuff out and move that across to the view model. Just put it down at the bottom here, just so we've got somewhere to cut and paste from. Right. What we then need to do is to bring across the bin location service. This is not going to be needed over this side anymore, so I can just take that out of the constructor, put that into the view model constructor, create a field for it, and then just tidy up back up here again. So back in our view model, we've now got the constructor working for us here. Now we should probably refactor some of this stuff out. Extract that into initialize map layer. That's fine. And then we can create one called update marker layer. Gosh, it's suggesting all of the code for us. Let's see what it's created there. So it understands. It really came close to that, didn't it? But it's get all bins. Weird. It's really weird. It can work out exactly what I'm doing, but then it doesn't work out the right method to call on the interface. And it forgets to add using statements and things like that. It's so close, but that sort of thing is really, really strange. But anyway, so it's creating the memory layer that we saw. Memory layer, named markers, adding features to that. Let's double check. Getting all the bins for each location. It does exactly what we saw there, getting the locator point for that particular latitude and longitude, creating a feature off the back of that. And it's creating color brush. So it needs some, yeah, I think that's going to be the MapSui specific one, isn't it? And then let's assume it's MapSui one as well. And it's saying marker layer .features.add feature, which is what we saw. Yep. Okay, so that looks good. Let's get rid of this because I think it's pretty much done all of that for us, but at least we're able to sort of cross-check and use that to verify that we were like in the right place in terms of what Copilot created for us there. Let's just see what this is complaining about. Has it got a method to add a feature then? Maybe Maybe we just need to add them all at once. So let's just delete that. So we need to convert this into a bit of link, basically. So bin locations dot select everything's on top of each other, so I can't see what it's proposing to do. I think it's right, but let's just. Okay, so bin locations, new point feature, yes, and styles is, yep, what we had. Features equal to locations, and then marker layer features equals features. Okay, so that's fine. And then for the time being, let's just call update marker layer at the top here. Check that we build, and we do build. So let's run that up and see if it does what we expect it to do. I'm gonna have to make a change to the Android emulator here, because I think it's currently still set to St. Paul's Cathedral. We'll need to move it into Hyde Park so it knows where we are. But I wonder if I can do that whilst it's starting up, or if it's going to be too busy to deal with it. Oh no, maybe. So this is interesting. I don't know if this has changed, but I don't feel that we used to be able to do set location. You had to specifically give it a route. Let's do that as well. Let's clear that. And you know what, whilst we've been talking about it, it seems to have come up in the right location, and it's got some bin markers shown. Look at that. How do we zoom out with this? Hey, perhaps a little bit bigger than they need to be. So let's try adjusting that scale down, but otherwise we seem to be already there. Very nice, very nice. Okay, let's close that down. Go back here and say symbol scale is, say, 0.4. Should we go for 0.4? Let's try that. So brilliant. That's everything that we need for today's session. I'll go and demonstrate this now to the dogs and see what they think.
Okay, guys, here we go. Look. Captain Scrunch, aren't you going to come? Mr. T, look, see, this is how the app works now, and you can see where we are actually on the map. It's all so much better than last time, isn't it? What do you mean, is that all? There's quite a bit. We've done a lot. I know we can't find out the way to the bin yet, but, you know, these things come in time.
Captain Scrunch. Hey, Captain Scrunch, come and look. What do you think? What do you said it's rubbish. Oh, great. Next time we'll try and improve it a little bit for you two guys, shall we? You don't get any compliments from these guys, huh?
We now have a much more functional app, but it still doesn't show us how to get to the nearest bin. Next time, we'll work out how to do some navigation in our app. Once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, ideas, or even your own coding canine adventures. And for you intrepid warriors of YouTube who've made it all the way through, thanks for watching. The intention for this week's video is that we start off with... Oh, bugger! I forgot to take my coat off. Hold on, I can do that YouTube thing. How does it go now? Something like... Oh, where am I? I'm hungry. Must be dinner time soon.